Hi everyone, welcome to our How to Improve Performance in Cognos webcast. My name is Candace Taylor and I am Marketing and Sales for Cresco, and I will be the moderator for today's webcast. We first want to start off by thanking you all for joining. A quick note before we get started, we will be recording the webcast and we'll send out a link of the recording to everyone as soon as it is available. Also, please feel free to ask questions throughout the webcast today by using the Q&A section on your control panel on your screen. We will review questions during the Q&A portion at the end of the webcast. I would like to introduce you to our presenters for today's webcast, Sanjeev Gowda, who is the Practice Director for Cresco, and Mark Yingling, who is IBM Analytics Solution Architect. Both Sanjeev and Mark will review information on improving performance in Cognos BI via the synergy of PureData for analytics. With that, I would like to pass the floor over to Sanjeev to start the webcast. Sanjeev?
Thank you so much, Candace, and welcome once again, everyone. And we're very glad to be presenting this webcast to you. I want to thank Mark for helping us out here as well. So as you know, we're an IBM business partner, and we focus on business analytics. A lot of times we get contacted by our clients who use IBM products such as Business Intelligence or Cognos or SPSS, Predictive Analytics, and they ask us questions which I think many of you can relate to is, how do I improve my performance? Right, I've got a 5 user base, I've got a 5,000 user base, and we're facing these performance issues. So that's why we're bringing this webcast to you, and wanted to introduce to you IBM Analytics with PureData systems, right? So for those of you who are not familiar with Cognos, so it's IBM's leading tool for business intelligence, reporting, and analytical applications, and introducing IBM PureData systems for analytics, which is also called PDA. Now, this is a technology that is powered by Netezza. It's a leading high-performance data warehouse and analytics appliance. Now, both these products are used by customers across multiple industries and multiple disciplines. So today what we want to discuss is how we can pair both IBM Cognos and IBM PureData systems for analytics to provide a fast analytics performance for our end users. So what you're seeing here is a screenshot of IBM Cognos Analytics. Now, this product or this appliance that we're talking about, PDA, can be used across multiple versions of Cognos, right? So those of you who are on Cognos 10 or those of you who are on Cognos Analytics can leverage the appliance layer to improve your data warehouse performance. So what we're seeing here is we're seeing Cognos Intelligence, which provides you advanced analytics capabilities, advanced visualization, reporting, and you can leverage multiple different data sources, right? So you have one reporting interface, which you can access multiple data sources, but also you can access multiple data source types. For example, you can look at the traditional query and reporting, or you could go more towards the cube or what they call OLAP data sources, and expanding into a area of visualization techniques that you can bring on top of the different types of data sources. Now, using Cognos BI, businesses are able to gain insights from their data, get a better understanding of business performance, and leverage predictive information to make confident decisions and to improve business operations and results, right? So you could have a really nice reporting application, but what is the point of it if you cannot trust your data, or if your data is not reaching you in time? So these are some issues that we see all the time, and lately, so there's some stats out there that say 90% of the data today has come about in the last 5 years, right? And when I say 90% of data across everything that we've ever recorded in the history of mankind. And so we see this on the business field as well, right? The first issue that we see, or the first reason to consider using a powerful data warehouse and analytics system behind Cognos is the increased data volume that organizations experience. So what you're looking at your screen over here is, this is the initial use case. We had limited history, tuned query, and now how do we move into the challenges that we have, which is a growing history, more data sources, And so this is a problem that many businesses are seeing today. Today we've got predictive analytics as data sources. We've got companies that are looking at social media to track their customers and know their clients much better than they've ever known. And so this gives a simplified look at Cognos, indicating that the Report Studio and Framework Manager components of the Cognos product, they act as data sources using adapters, right? Some of these adapters could be the RD EMS adapter, right? This could be a database or a file system, whether it's spreadsheets or Access databases or any other kind of source of data. Now, typically, a project might start with a limited scope, right? When you're building data warehouses, and this is the initial use case, and it might even be a subset of company data to be analyzed, right? You want to start with small steps and then head towards your enterprise data warehouse. So with this limited scope and the tight project management, tuning efforts can be easily handled, right? The project is a success, business users are getting value, they're very happy with what they're getting, but now they want more, right? They say, okay, can we get more information? How do we, get information across multiple sources? And over time, this is what typically happens in any organization, whether you're a startup or you're a well-established company or you're a company that's just collecting massive amounts of data. So this is a time when you start having these issues and you start thinking of warehouses, more sources, and how do you get this together? Another example could be, you want to start analyzing multiple years of data. So looking at, on the left-hand side, you've got a small data set, which might be about 2 to 3 years of data. But what if you want to start analyzing more than that? What if you want to start looking at data that is maybe 10, 20 years of historical information so that you can add that to your current use case? You want to see, you probably have customers who've been with you for 10 years plus. You want to look at the buying patterns. You want to understand product information, vendor information, quality, anything that you can add. If you have, let's say, a large bucket where whatever you add into it gives you value. And so these volumes and the complexity of data and queries arise and they increase with time, and more administration and tuning is required. And someone has to do it. So you've got IT staff and systems that just cannot keep up, and they're trying to manage your expectations. Another use case could be you have organizations that are looking at predictive analytics to run fast, efficient models, but capturing historical trends, the need for larger data sets to accurately get predictive models also depends on historical data. So what do we do in this situation? So if you're looking at the slide over here, so we've got external data sources, and you can see a bunch of SQL and other different data sources. You've got some flat files and some other sources that all go up towards the Cognos business intelligence layer, right? So this is what we consider as the second issue, which I just mentioned in the previous slide, is that you could have multiple data sources in an organization. An easy way in the beginning is to limit the scope of your project or your installation, but maybe it isn't to limit the information, and the customer faces multiple data sources at a very fast pace. We've seen it with so many of our clients where the company that is growing, I'll give you an example of a client up in the northeast part of the country that changed the way they were doing their marketing and their strategy and their distribution channels, when now they've suddenly allowed people to buy products directly off their website and don't depend as much on the distribution channels. Well, now suddenly they're bombarded with all this customer information, and how do they deal with it? So real life situation. So this is where Cognos BI has great features to help to work with data from multiple types of data sources. While maybe this may be masked for users, the IT folks, unfortunately, have to deal with the situation. More importantly than simply just managing and administering your these multiple interfaces, with whatever's happening behind the scene. One concern might be that the source system of this new query workload needs to be added immediately, so that you can not only see transactional workloads, but also add the new queries to see what impact it has on businesses. And what happens if the data to support the query comes from two or more sources. We see this very often, right? This is the reason why we have data warehouses where, I want to make a business decision, but I'm just limited to the source system that I have. To make that business decision, I need to have access to another set of data, right? And this is where we start bringing in multiple sources. It might be two or more. And at this point, we start deciding, okay, how do we join the data? How do we aggregate it? At what level do we aggregate it? Now we start getting into much more complex situations. And how is this process? Different data sources, one could be at a day level, one could be at a monthly level. How do you tie those together? So when I run a report for a month, I see rolled up or aggregated numbers across the board, right? So this also, if you think about it, this is from the back end, a little bit more technical, but this does increase load on networks and on the Cognos server, right? So there are consistent data standards across different systems or application packages, and dealing with those have become a worrisome situation for the reporting layer developers, such as the Cognos developers, right? Or whatever application you're using today in your organization as a business intelligence application or tool, you will face a situation. So what do we do with this situation, and how do we proceed? So in the next slide, we're looking at a new added layer, which is the data warehouse, right? Most companies have data warehouses. Some companies have something like a data warehouse, which is termed as data warehouse. But here are some benefits of a data warehouse and where it should reside, which is right between the database and between the reporting layer, right? So this data warehouse and strategies to populate the data warehouse will eliminate the problems as I've just discussed in the previous 2-3 slides, and will make the transition to a world of self-service business intelligence. Right? You can still have, we see this many times where companies say we have true self-service business intelligence. What happens in these situations is end users are hitting the source system directly. And when you start doing that, when you start hitting the source system or your operational systems, you can create chaos in an organization. You can slow down the system. It's like the way I describe this to my clients is I'm trying to change a tire of a car while the car is moving. Right? Very, very difficult. It's almost impossible, right? And so eventually you will end up where you do require a middle layer, and the middle layer always will help in situations where if you have situations to improve query performance, you want to create subject-oriented business divisions of data, right? So if my marketing department or my sales, human resources, inventory, supply chain, different business lines require reporting, we can put all of this in a data warehouse. Right? And it also gives you the integrated and consistency in the names and definitions within the business or data governance. It's a big topic. We can talk about that, all day, but this is a primary situation that most companies are faced with when they start getting into multiple data sources. All right, and then also static and non-static data, meaning which one should be updated at what speed and so on. So a couple more slides on multiple data sources and the advantages of a data warehouse. Right. So again, once you have a data warehouse, as per this slide, we've encompassed or integrated 4, 5, or even more different data sources into one big giant data warehouse, right? And so you don't have to deal with multiple data sources anymore. It's more of a single database. You don't have to think twice about where the data resides. All my data is stored in this one bucket. You also get the names, the data types, the definitions, the standardizations that organizations don't have, many organizations don't have even today. Right? So now processing of data from different data sources can be done within the database, right? And you can still have your Cognos business intelligence sit on top of the data warehouse. And this will, save a lot of efforts on maintenance, on management, on additions or subtractions from databases without impacting the business user, which is a very important point here. All right, so coming to the solution of these situations and these challenges, growing data volumes, how do we deal with that? We've got existing clients and customers who are faced with this day and night, and they want to find a situation that can make the business user as well as the IT department happy. And so since companies are looking more and more towards using analytics to provide that competitive advantage, the solution needs to be able to support a variety of workloads. So today's queries and reports, tomorrow's dashboards, and also predictive analytics. So finally, let me just move on to the next slide and show you guys. Now this slide shows Cognos 10 and PureData systems for analytics. Those of you who are using the new version of Cognos, which is the Cognos Analytics, can also use PureData systems. Now those of you who are using other products within the IBM stack, such as the predictive SPSS, can also use this, and we'll talk more about that in the next few slides. But I think at this point, before I pass it on to Mark, I just want to say that giving or having IBM software or any kind of software for analytics, as well as the appliance that we have with PDA, the integration points do make it much easier for improved performance and on your data warehouse. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Mark. And Mark, here you go. This is your stuff.
Okay, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody joining this webcast today. So when we talk about PureData for system for analytics, what really is it? Well, simply it's just a system that integrates server, storage, database, and analytic functions in a simple, easy-to-use load-and-go appliance. And I really mean appliance, right? So there's very little overhead in terms of administration types of things, but this appliance is designed from the ground up to be optimized for analytic workloads, and has a standard SQL interface. So you don't have to learn anything new. In this case, what I'm showing here is the smallest version of the PDA appliance, and that's we term it the Mini, and the code name for it is Mako. So it's a Mini Mako, and it's a 2U rackable unit that supports 16 terabytes worth of user data. And that when I say user data, I mean you don't have to have any aggregate tables, and there's no indexes that need to be built. This is just fact tables and dimension tables and whatnot. So and it also has redundant hardware. So if you're looking for high availability, this is the system for you, because if one of the servers goes down, it automatically loads to the next server or to the standby server. So it's definitely enterprise ready. So next slide, please. Oh, there you go. So when I talked about in the previous slide, I talked about analytic functions that were built in. And what I was referring to was there are built-in database functions that come with every PDA resource. And this fusion of data warehousing and in-database analytics allow for a very scalable, high performance, and because this is massively parallel platform, it's designed to crunch through petascale size data very quickly. So really what it allows the user to do is allows the user to ask questions at the speed of thought. So you don't have to ask it some kind of very complex analytic style question and then walk away, go grab lunch, and then hopefully it'll come back answered when you get back. Sometimes they don't even come back at all, and we'll show you a little bit in some of the performance statistics that some of them didn't. But it also allows for full integration to, this allowing this in-database analytics built in with integration with, other vendors. I mean, it could be SAS, it could SPSS, as we talked about, fuzzy logic, or even open source R. So this in-database integration is really kind of at the heart of things. So when you issue a query, it's going to use the in-database functionality, but it's going to be running on the PDA box at the speed of the PDA box, rather than, say, issuing an SPS query and having it run on the SPS server, so SPSS server, or one of the other servers that might be running. So it's all running on the box itself. So next slide, please. So what also comes with PDA is some additional software entitlements, and they're listed there on the right. And if you look at it, Cognos, it comes with 5 analytic users of Cognos and administrator license. So you can use Cognos. So if you don't have Cognos, you have licenses to use it and use it on your PDA box. But it also comes with a data integration and transformation software license in the form of data stage that allow you, and we talked about, or Sajid talked about this earlier, all these different data sources, multiple data sources. How do I bring them in? How do I tie them into the data warehouse appliance itself? Well, this data stage license will allow you to do that, bringing it from, how many ever multiple data sources that you have, you can bring it into the PDA box, transform it. And actually there's integration with data stage to allow, instead of ETL, extract, transform, and load, it's ELT, so it's extract, load, and transform. So the PDA box is actually doing the transformation, and it's doing it at the PDA speed, which when we talk about PDA speed, it's really done at a hardware level, right, and not at a software level. And then we have additional licenses for Hadoop services. So if you want to build a Hadoop cluster, we have big insights for Apache Hadoop. And then we also have the real-time analytics in the form of InfoSphere streams, and that's doing analytics on the fly, on the wire. So, but one of the most important things about this particular add-on, and it's really not really an add-on, it's just it's a function that was built in the latest version of the software for PDA, is called Fluid Query. And if you remember a couple of slides back, where Sanjeev had that, the warehouse layer, but then he also had lines and arrows pointing down to external data sources. So what Fluid Query does is it allows you to create a federated query. And if you're not familiar with what federated query means, is I can take an SQL statement, or some kind of a query statement that's run on PDA, but if I know about other data sources and data sources out there that are not loaded in the warehouse, like for instance an Oracle data source or a Hadoop data source or something like that, I can go out, and if the data that's lying, that I'm asking for in that query, is lying in one of those external data sources, it will go out and take that part of the query, run it on that source data source, wait for the results set, return it back to the appliance, and then continue processing. So it actually allows you to query other data sources other than the ones that are in the appliance, which is a very interesting and very timely thing, because sometimes you have unstructured or semi-structured data that's residing in a Hadoop cluster that is not really relational, but you still want to be able to query it and get a result set back from it. Next slide, please. So when I said earlier that it was IBM had these Cognos licenses, if you look at it, the development teams for both Cognos 10 and Cognos Analytics, because when you think of Cognos 10 and Cognos Analytics, the underlying structures for each of those versions are really the same. And it has that deep integration because the two groups were working in concert together, because we wanted to make the two systems work and work well together. So Cognos was optimized, Cognos 10 was optimized, and Cognos Analytics is optimized for PDA. And Cognos, and Sajid will talk about this later, uses a feature called dynamic query model. And it really exploits the in-memory and caching techniques that PDA is using to make both the systems, when there are both softwares or both systems when you're working together, run faster. And Cognos also can take advantage of the analytics in-database functions of PDA, so that when it uses one of those functions, the PDA machine is actually executing that, as opposed to having it run back on the Cognos server. Next slide, please. So when is PureData systems for analytics a really good fit? That can be answered in a couple of ways. I mean, we can, if you have a database that's at least a half a terabyte, 500 gigabytes or more, that is a really good fit. But we can also scale up to 1.5 petabytes of data. Now, we're not talking about petabytes on the server, because that tops out at 16 terabytes. But you know, you can add racks onto the system and grow it to 1.5 petabytes. But it's also, you know, good for when you have a warehouse or a data mart solution that is not performing well, where you need a lot of DBA time coming in, creating aggregate tables, creating more indexes in order to make the warehouse or the data mart or whatever that you have in place to make it faster, to make it even, you know, come up to, you know, some standard of you know, usability. But sometimes those queries that are put on these data marts won't even finish because of it takes too long, and even if you have aggregate tables or create a ton of indexes, it's not gonna work. And again, you know, this increased DBA time that where they're constantly babysitting the warehouse is not a very good use of their time, because they should be doing other things, you know, creating more more projects for the business, or supporting the business in a better way, other than, you know, creating aggregates and indexes and tuning the database and the data warehouse. Next slide, please. So I think this is where I'm going to pass it back to Sanjeev, and he can talk a little bit more about the dynamic data model, or query mode, and how it's used in PDA.
Yes, Mark. So, Mark, one of the things that caught my attention in your presentation was, you know, how, and I've seen this many times in my careers, is where people will be trying to run a query or a report and say, let me go grab my coffee and I'll be right back, and hopefully by then my report is up and running, right? So with this combination of Cognos and PDA, we don't see that, correct? I mean, this is not like the 90s. And
yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. Like I said, the development teams for both Cognos and PDA worked very closely so that they could synergy around the two products, so that putting them together makes it very fast. Because as I said, when you're running a query, you don't want, you know, if you have a Cognos server, you don't want that server to run, you know, the complex analytics piece. You want it to be pushed down and let the PDA box, which is designed and optimized for speed, to do that query for you, and then return the results set. So that's why, you know, like I said, I can point to many customers, and I'll have a story about one that I talk about a lot, is a hospital in Minnesota. You know, it was in Minnesota that, you know, they had a query that didn't run. They couldn't get it to run in their environment, and they put it on the PDA box during the POC process, and it ran. It came back literally in 30 seconds. So, and that was with no tuning. All they did was load the data, issue the query, and boom, it came back. And it came back with some surprising results.
Yeah, that's amazing. Excellent. So, you know, I'll tell you what. So within the Cognos stack, I'm going to jump into two things over here now. Dynamic query mode is it's a mode, right? It's a that you can turn off and turn on within the Cognos engine, which will improve performance. It's also optimized for PDA, right? And you know, we talk about OLAP, we talk about relational databases. This is something what is called OLAP over relational, or OOR in the business, which is a hybrid SQL MDX technique. And if you think about it, those of you who are using Cognos or any other metadata that transforms MDX into SQL, and what I mean by that is, let's say you have a model that let's say if an end user wants to drill from sales across the US all the way down to sales not just by state, but let's say sales by city as well. So within that real estate, you're actually, within the same window of frame without going to multiple reports or multi-tab reports, you're actually getting to see that information. So as and when you drill down to the level of detail, what happens is your metadata layer is sending MDX back and forth to the databases. Now, if it's a relational database, what happens is they get converted into relational database or relational SQL that hits the SQL database and comes back up, gets converted back into MDX, and then goes back up to your report. Those of you who are not aware what MDX is SQL, but for cubes. So this back and forth of MDX conversion to SQL, SQL conversion to MDX takes some time, and you can avoid that, and you can still maintain your security within the metadata, within the data, and you can also start using caching. Right? Caching technology is great. So DQM does have a 64-bit architecture, which is great. Those clients that we service who jump from a 32-bit solution to a 64-bit have seen, I'm not joking, but this is true fact, have seen 2x improved performance across the board, across reporting, across query generation, SQL, as well as OLAP reporting. And we, Candace will mention a giveaway that we have today that you can always ask us and we can send it to you. But when you convert to DQM in your existing Cognos environment, there are a few things that you need to do. Most places I see people will just change it in their framework manager, but no, if you want true DQM service, there are a few things that you need to do within the Cognos. We can help you with that. So that talks about the DQM, dynamic query mode. We've also got a JDBC connection directly to Netezza, so that will help your DMR queries as well as your OLAP data sources get data much quicker in return time. Okay, so
and just to mention on top of that dynamic query mode and the in-memory and the caching and everything, that is being pushed down from the data from the Cognos server down into the PDA appliance. So the PDA appliance is actually handling that. So the 2x or the 3x improvement in speed that you saw, if you were to push that down on the PDA, you would see that exponential, just increase to probably 10x or 20x type of a thing because it's running on a PDA appliance.
Yeah, and you can say exponentially, Mark. I mean, that's a true statement, right? When we see clients start using PDA, it's like a light bulb, and their eyes just open wider than usual, and say, "Wow, look at this performance." So, I would say I would feel safe by saying that, right? And in addition to DQM, it does definitely help in caching the data and storing it within the PDA appliance. So here is using Cognos with PureData for analytics. So while OLAP is still great for drill up and drill down options, like I said, it'll give you that wealth of information within the same real estate, and you can see it here in the screenshot. Or if you're someone who uses OLAP very often, typically what I see is once people start going through a cube, the drill up and drill down technology is so valuable to any business that they rarely go back to looking at transactional reporting unless it's required. But this gives you true analysis, true analytics by slicing and dicing multiple dimensions of data, right? So here using DMR with DQM can help in situations where you see slow performing queries. So where you can cache your query, you can help in preventing data requests to go back and forth between the data layer and the report layer, and tremendously improve quality and quantity and response times, so that what you're doing is you're improving the customer satisfaction, your customer satisfaction, as well as you're growing your analytics user base. And if data is not cached, only then Will additional data be required to fulfill the query? And that then goes and pings the database. Okay, so let's talk about dynamic cubes. So Cognos dynamic cubes, if you already are a customer who uses IBM Cognos, you should have this in your stack. It's nothing that you have to buy in addition to what you already have. So what it is it is a DMR, or dimensionally modeled relational data source that caches data. So what it does is it provides increased scalability and the ability to share data caches between users, which is great, and this helps in improving performance. It also allows you to create dynamic cube data source that is preloaded with dimensions, and allows a richer set of dimensional modeling options and explicit management of member and data caches of dynamic cubes. Okay, so what we're looking at over here is basically it's just kind of showing you the BI layer as well as the Netezza data warehouse layer. So one important thing to remember about caching in dynamic cubes is that it will always find the shortest path to the data. I can underline that and underscore it. In memory aggregate cache and pre-aggregated data, the performance improvements are tremendous. And so getting the right aggregates in the cache is important, or optimizing the aggregates that we load is very critical. We also use, within the product, we also use something known as the aggregate advisor. And so here are some, on the right-hand side, you'll see some statistics that show over 80% of queries are less than 3 seconds, and over half of the queries are in sub-seconds. I want to show you an example of a big data warehouse, about 10 terabytes, with tied with dynamic cubes, right? So if you look at this, 28.8 billion row fact tables, and you have 65 million members in the largest dimension, which is the customer dimension. And if you look at the pie charts over here, so you have the first open and the subsequent open. The pie slices, if you look at the turquoise or the blue one and the green one, so the less than 1 second and the 1 to 3 second have tremendously increased or reduced, I should say, in the first and subsequent open. So what that means, that tells us, is that using the combination of PDAs with dynamic cubes, you're noticing that the performance of the first few reports, which is very critical, is much quicker, and the subsequent open is much faster. So if you look at the subsequent open between the first open and subsequent open for the turquoise region, it jumps from 58% to 71%. So that just shows your queries are now opening much faster in less than 1 second. Huge performance improvement. And this is something that it's collaboration between the clients and IBM Labs, and a lot of customers are asking for this. Now, single sign-on is a very big topic, and as and when you see multiple appliances or multiple applications out there, you know, companies are requesting for single sign-on. And so this kind of lays out how IBM is dedicated towards their clients using Cognos and Netezza. The engineers are trying to make sure that they make everything Kerberos single sign-on experience, whether it is the 7.2 version of Netezza or the 10.2.2 version in Cognos. And a lot of the stuff is tested, tried out before being released out to end clients. IBM also goes through a program where you know, they will ask clients or business partners like ourselves to help in and do some testing and beta testing as well. So this kind of this should give you the confidence that, you know, you've got IBM IBM Lab Services working on this, and they will make sure that, you know, if you're using this combination or any combination of IBM products that requires the single sign-on, you are getting that, and it's work that's being done. So very quickly, this is and how Netezza Analytics ties into Cognos. So as you can see, we've got the Cognos, whether it's Framework Manager, Report Studio. What we actually do from here is, from the report layer or the metadata layer, is we can call stored procedures directly into Netezza. So Netezza has these UDS, or the channels, I would say, to go and bring stored procedures directly using Netezza Analytics functions and leverage those functions tied along with the database functions that come from the end user running the reports or the framework manager layer to pull data and mine that from the Netezza tables and access this using report generation period, right? Also, this is read-only analytical stored procedures, and the UDX layer can be run directly from Cognos reports. And as I mentioned early on, combination of predictive analytics, or SPSS, and PureData systems for analytics. So as you can see here, SPSS is the predictive analytics product from IBM. It's been in the market for almost 60 years, I believe, or 40 years. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but it's been there for a very long time, and it is one of the leading predictive analytics products out there, right? What's really nice about it is it has the visual, and it's very visual. It's easy to use, and it's basically drag and drop. So there's a, you don't have to code, but it does give those who are familiar with R code in predictive analytics who want to start typing R can still do that within this product and pull results from a database. And so what we're talking about over here is SPSS automatically generates SQL for PDA and leverages the database functions that PDA can take advantage of by SPSS. So what happens in this situation is PDA is doing all the heavy lifting, and as and when you are a developer or a business analyst on the predictive team, you're doing all this work that is being sent to the heavy lifting of pulling the data is being done by the appliance. So the appliance is doing all the heavy lifting. You're just telling it what you want, whether you're typing your own code or you're using the drag and drop functionality, which requires no code. It's all visualization based and menu driven, and you get your results back in your interface. So I'm going to pass it back to Mark, who's going to talk about some more examples of clients who are using and PDAs and what the outcomes are.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, again, just understand that all of the, when he says all of the heavy lifting, I mean all of the functionality is being pushed down into PDA, and PDA is doing all the execution. So it's not being executed on the SPSS server or the Cognos server or what have you, because taking the integration and pushing it down to PDA. And this is is a great segue into this Qualcomm example. So it's a customer. I mean, if you're not familiar with Qualcomm, they're a world leader in next-gen mobile technologies, and they had they were using the Mini but they were using a couple of racks of PDAs that were tied together. But they had performance issues with their large data warehouses, and they had data warehouses spread across the enterprise, and they weren't able to respond to the business needs and produce the results that they wanted, because it was taking time to do the analysis. The warehouses were very slow, and so what they decided to do is they consolidated all of those data warehouses down onto the PDA environment. And this accomplished a couple of things, right? So the consolidation, they were now able to do analytics on all of their data that they were never able to do before. And the analytics that they were able to do were actually being done faster, so they could respond to the business needs and respond to new projects that the businesses were coming out with. Because when you roll out a PDA environment, you are actually, and we've seen this a number of times, actually able to evangelize and spread analytics farther into the enterprise. So you're going to have more people that have availability to this environment and are able to run their own analytics. and produce their own results and come up with, maybe astonishing type of projects or outcomes or what have you. So this was a great example in Qualcomm because that's exactly what they were able to do. They were able to produce these analytics results faster and roll it out to the larger enterprise. And they used PDA for analytics and Cognos. And as I said, they probably, they had a larger rack system, but not the PDA, the mini model, which is perfect for them if they have a departmental type of departmental type of issues. The next slide, please. The next use case is, and this one is really kind of interesting because Fleet Advisor is a consulting company that provides risk management and advisory services to trucking and logistics organizations. And they do that, and their sole purpose for being, and their sole value that they give to their customers is to capture all of this data that's coming from Internet of Things and whatnot. They actually look at 4,000 plus data elements, and they take all that into account. And what they do is they give this information to their customers. And really, it's kind of helping their customers reduce risk. Well, in order to do that, they have to have analytics, and they have to use SPSS to come up with these predictive models. But if they don't have a system that can come up with this data and these answers fast, then they're really not going to be able to predict or produce the information for their customers fast enough, and they're probably not going to run it. They're probably not going to be in business very long because no one wants to wait for days and months to get this analysis down. Well, what they found was they were able to implement this highly flexible and very scalable predictive analytics solution. And like I said, they took 4,000 plus data elements. This is Internet of Things from the trucks and from the rigs and whatnot that they're doing. And they were able to come up with this quantitative risk ratings for each of the drivers for these customers. And what that meant was they could take that rating, give it to their customer, and their customer could then take that, look at it, and say if they have a driver that has a really high risk rating, maybe they need to give him more training, or find out exactly what he's doing because he's at a higher risk of having an accident, which would result in a loss for the company and possibly a loss of life, right? So they were able to do that, and they were able to come up with it very fast, and I think it provided a great benefit to their customers. Next slide. So I think as we've looked at throughout this whole presentation, we've seen that Cognos and Netezza are very good integrated solutions. And there's really 5 reasons, and there's probably more, but these are the 5 top ones that we've come up with why the two make sense. And the first one is really the big one in my mind, is that it's interactive analysis, right? So you have really the ability for somebody to do analytics at the speed of thought. So they can maybe type in a SQL query or come up with some kind of scenario that they're thinking about and have that result set brought back to them, very quickly, instead of walking away and coming back in an hour and still not running, and so they're thinking about something else. So if you have the ability to do speed of thought type of analysis, your questions that you're coming up with based on the results, are easier, and you may have come up with more questions that you wouldn't have thought of if you had got a cup of coffee or come back and said, darn, this thing that didn't run, so now I have to think of something else. The second one is enterprise scale, and again, I pointed to this earlier. It's like we can support thousands of users on these systems. So you can roll enterprise analytics out to the enterprise rather than just having a little coven, if you will, of data scientists or people that do analytics, and that's all they do, and they can't roll it out to anybody else, and who might have need for it and maybe come up with some other better ideas for the company. And then the compelling visualizations. I know, in this page we're talking about Cognos 10, but Cognos Analytics is pretty stellar in its UI and how it presents data. And then we optimize queries. Again, the the optimization between Cognos and PDA is done such that a lot of the heavy lifting, a lot of the workload that's being done normally in a Cognos server is now being pushed down and running at hardware speeds in a PDA environment. And the last one is no wait time. Again, some of these queries come back as instantaneous, and they're coming back, in sub-second, or at the very most maybe a minute or so. So you can get a lot of results back faster. Next slide. So I want to kind of finish off with how do we really compete in the smaller markets with this PDA Mini, this Mini Mako, that with SQL Server environments. So if you go to the next slide, there was a survey done a couple of years back, and I think it still holds true in that, rock solid, and they have no relation to IBM at all. They went out and did a survey, and they were looking at, what is the SQL Server install base? And they looked at it, and they came back, and 80% of them, the install base for SQL Server, were 2008 or older. And Microsoft Server, or Microsoft 2, doesn't support. It's 2008. Anything below that is out of support. So you've got companies that are running unsupported databases. And if you think about it, SQL Server 2008 was not really intended to run at analytic workload. So if you go to the next slide, you can look at, we can talk about, because it's not intended to run analytic workloads, you need to custom build it. You need to make, fact tables, and you need to have an army of VBAs, coming in and tuning this thing to make it work. Or you can look at the Mini Mako, and you have ready to go, load and go, and I'm up and running. And the example I talked about earlier was this hospital in Minnesota, and I can go into a little bit more about that. We had there's a POC process that's done for PDAs, and it's really intended to show them that we do live up to the hype that we're trying to pitch here. Is that they rolled in a POC, actually it was a Mini, and they rolled it into their environment, and they do the POC, and they had two data scientists that really wanted to do the POC themselves. So we had our IBM engineer there, and they said, all right, you just give us our 10-minute, how do you do this type of thing, and then go sit in the corner, and if we have any questions, we'll ask you. Well, they had several, queries that would not run, and they actually loaded the data and were able to start running queries in a day. And one of the queries, as I said, was never returning, and they put it into the PDA system, and it returned a query, or it returned the result set back in under a minute. And they had one guy there he didn't believe it. It came back so fast. He spent 3 hours dissecting it to make sure that the SQL was done correctly, and he finally said, well, yeah, this is the right SQL, and it was returning that fast. He spent 3 hours just trying to disprove the fact that the result set was done that fast. So when I say you're ready, it's a load and go appliance, I really mean it, because these data scientists really didn't have any IT system admin, DBA type of experience. They knew how to create a table, they knew how to create an SQL statement, and that was about it. So it really does live up to the hype. Next slide. So if you think about it, the 4 things you know about SQL Server, and we're kind of running out of time, so I'll go slow or go faster, is that, again, SQL Server 2008 is not optimized for OLTP loads or analytic loads. It's for OLTP. It has no built-in HA because that's just the way the server is built, and scalability is limited. You can't throw any more hardware at it because you can't add another box onto it and expect it to get faster. And the data compression is limited, right? Because it's expecting everything in sorted order. If it's not in sorted order, then it's not going to get any compression. So those are a couple things to remember about that. So if you look at this, the Mini Appliance, we had an AppNet, and they did their own kind of testing, and they came up with 127x faster. The next slide, Grassroots, the same kind of deal, wasn't as fast, but it was still 44 times faster. So if you look at now, that was 2008. So if you look at the SQL Server columnar edition, which came out I think in 2012, we're still faster. We did a couple of testing, so I'm on 33, so 2 slides ahead. We did 2 workload tests, sales report and complex queries, and we did it in 2 modes: one single user and one more multi-user type of an environment. So if you go to the next slide, we looked at because if you're trying to migrate from 2008 to anything older, anything newer past 2012, the hardware that you have to run that 2008 environment is not going to run. It's not going to run 2012 or greater. So you have to buy new hardware. So you're going to have to invest in new hardware and more expensive licenses for SQL Server. And this is a comparison to see kind of where you're at. And we started with this, and we're 30% less in price over a 3-year period than SQL Server. And if you go to the next slide, we did this one test, and one of the complex queries would not run on the hardware that we threw at it. So we wanted to make it work. So if you go to the next slide, we spent a week of time tuning the database, and then we had to put in over a terabyte of flash drive at an additional cost to get this thing to run. It finally ran, but if you look at it on the PDA side, there's no indexes, no aggregates, no tuning. We just loaded it and go. And if you go to the next slide, you can see that while it did run, it was still slower, and it increased the cost because we had to do the flash drive to make it run faster, to make it run at all. So if you go to the final slide, or slide 38, the PDA just beats SQL Server. I mean, it's faster to get it up and running. It's easier to maintain. It's faster with Cognos, and more importantly, it costs less. And there's no sacrifices in performance. So it's just easier to run. It beats the older traditional row column or row-oriented database, but it also beats the columnar version that's the new one out. So finally, it's just a smarter choice. We've got a proven architecture for complex analytics and large data volumes. It's truly an appliance, like I said, load and go, quick and easy, and there's no administration at all, or very little. In database analytics, that keeps the processing down on the PDA level. There's no indexes, no tuning, and then all of the entitlements that you get. You get Cognos with it. You get integrated data integration and transformation with data stage. You get Hadoop services with Big Insights, and you get real-time analytics with InfoSphere streams. So with that, I think we have. I'll give it back to Sanjeev, and he can wrap it up with some Q&A.
Thanks, Mark. Just very quickly, we have a giveaway, and as you can see up here on your screen, send us an email with a subject line, and we'll be more than happy to send you this information of how to increase the performance of your Cognos environment with assessments and tips and tricks. Now, this webinar is, though we talk about PDA and Cognos, it doesn't have to be with Cognos. It could be any other business intelligence or visualization application that you're using to show off your data, but it will always improve your performance as a proven practice and proven methodology and the client success stories. So I'm going to give it back to Candice, and if we can start the Q&A session and move from there.
Thank you, Sanjeev, and thank you, Mark, both for great presentations. We are on the hour, so I'm going to ask one question so that we can still maintain that hour-long webinar. The first question I believe is for you, Mark, and it is, what does the implementation process look like for PDA?
Sure, that's a really good question. We have, and this has been a proven process for the last 10 years, a POC process that we will come in, and you can do it. There's 2 flavors of it. You can either have a PDA appliance brought to your data center, or you can do it off-site in a remote manner where we can have PDA boxes. But what we'll do is we'll come in, do an evaluation of your current environment, grab your tables and your data, and we can put it on the PDA box. And what we ask for is your toughest queries. Give us the queries that you want to run that haven't been running, or that running slowly or would never run, and we'll put it up onto our system and show you that you can get performance out of this thing, and you can get your queries back faster than you've ever had them done before.
Great, thank you, Mark. Due to time, this is all the questions we will take today. However, if you did submit a question that did not get answered, we will directly provide an answer to you via email. You can also email me directly. On the screen, you'll see my email, ctaylor@crescointl.com, with any questions that you might have. Really quickly, before I do conclude the webcast, just wanted to let you guys know about some upcoming events. We do have a really cool case study webcast coming up on next week on June 1st, and it's basically going to be a presentation from Tactical Institute, and they're going to talk about how they utilize IBM Watson Analytics to gain deeper analysis for crime analysis and also crime prevention. And then we are going to have a complimentary workshop that relates directly to this webcast in the Dallas, Texas area. That's going to be on June 22nd, and we're going to take a deep dive look into PureData analytics, and it'll be about a half-day workshop. So any of these events, you can always go to our website at crescointl.com/events, or you can also, again, email me or email us at info@crescointl.com, and we can register you for those events for you. So that does conclude our webcast for today. We just want to thank everyone for joining. Please, again, feel free to reach out to us. Our phone number is on the screen, our email address. Visit our website. We do have a chat functionality on our website. You can chat with us with any questions or any needs you might have. Sanjeev and Mark, do you guys have anything else you guys would like to add?
I just want to say, if you like that blue bike on Mark's presentation, we would love you to ride one. So give us a call, and we'll make sure that you can ride one of those bikes.
I'll stay off the bike. Not very good. Yeah. Thank you all for attending. I appreciate your time.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.